Hey everybody, it's your host Don Mike Mendoza, and welcome to Producing While Asian. Today's conversation is with Cori Dioquino, who is the founding artistic director of the Baltimore Asian Pasifika Arts Collective. She's also an active team member with Unapologetically Asian, and you've probably seen her on television in TV shows such as Daredevil. So we're very lucky to have her today to talk about her experiences as a woman and BIPOC AAPI woman in producing and as an actor in both theater and television and film. So we hope you enjoy our conversation, and welcome to Producing While Asian. Welcome, Cori Dioquino, to Producing While Asian. How are you today?
I'm good.
Good, good. It's so exciting to have you. And I know you and I have gone back and forth and tried to figure out what we could do together. And, we collaborated in 2020 a little bit on a project that you had. And it's so good to just sit here and talk to you about you and about where you came from and what your history is and your experience in not just being a producer, but just in the arts as a Filipinx person. So I'm going to let you take it away. So Cori, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you kind of landed where you are.
Oh God, I hate
I
it's
know
so
it's a big
weird.
question.
Like, I know, right? Well, I was born in Pasay. No, no, I mean the short version of the story is I immigrated from Pasay. I was born in Pasay in the Philippines, and I immigrated to Maryland. And I think probably the whole I don't know if you were like this growing up, but I feel like all Filipinos are a little dramatic. Like
Oh yeah,
I was like,
absolutely.
I grew up singing. Yeah, like I grew up singing and like performing in front of people. Like I just, anytime someone was on TV singing a song, I just started immediately performing for them. I don't know. It
Yeah.
was just, so I think it was just in my blood or just in me. And, eventually I think I figured out that I could, like, I needed to go to college and I really didn't want to go to college. And I think at that point, my parents were just like, I don't care what you study, just go to college, get some kind of a degree. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do
Okay.
theater. Um, so
That's
I
so
think,
not my experience, but that's awesome.
I think by then it was just like, I grew up an only child. So I think by then it was like, we cannot force this girl to do what she doesn't want to do. So like I think maybe by then my
Sure.
parents had realized they would have to somehow meet me in the middle. Like if they're gonna force me to get a college degree, which I wanted to take a break. Like I didn't want to go straight to college.
Sure.
And my mom coaxed me because she was like, if you don't go to college now, you're
The
never
guilt
gonna
trip.
go to college ever. And so I was just
Right.
like, fine. And eventually I found my way to theater, and kind of the rest is history, I think.
Sweet. So, all right. I know the show is called Producing While Asian, but a lot of my guests are people that have started as an actor or started, not even in the arts. And so, talk to me about where you see yourself on a scale of one to producer, and I
Uh,
ask that question because there is no definition of what a producer is, because it's so many different things, right? If you're a producer in music, it's different from a theater producer, is different from a content producer. So,
True.
it's more so that's the root of the question. So where do you see yourself there? Why or why not?
I guess I would probably at this point just say I'm producer. I think mostly because I have so many ideas and I'm always looking for ways to get the ideas out there. I think I've
Mhm.
gotten to a point now where I was talking to Jeremiah Abraham actually about this, where we were
Nice.
talking about how many ideas we always have. And it's just having to
Hmm.
filter the ideas to figure out what's the most manageable for now, and figuring out how to be patient with the other ones that you kind of have to put on the
Hmm.
back burner. So I think for me, I would just say where I am in my career, especially because my acting career has had to take such a huge step
Yeah.
back. At this point, I
Hmm.
just feel like I'm producer. There are other things that I want to do creatively that I can't let out that energy as an actor. So my outlet has become a producer. I've tried to do directing. I'm not over directing quite yet, but I don't
Sure.
like directing as much as I do producing. I don't know
Why?
why.
Why
There's
is
something
that?
about produce. I
Yeah.
think I don't know. I feel like as a director, you still kind of have a box that you have to fit into. There are
Mm-hmm.
like certain parameters that you have to fulfill and sort of make sure that you don't step outside of. And there's always limitations I still see as a director, and they're not too dissimilar from the limitations that an actor feels. There's always someone above you telling you what you can and cannot do. Whereas I feel as a producer, I'm not going to say I have complete control over the situation, because, you know, as a producer, you have to try to give the director creative control and liberty to do what they need to do. But I really like how, as a producer, I can say what projects I greenlight. I have control over what stories I want to tell. I'm not just waiting for somebody to assign to me a story to tell like I would as an actor or director. You know, I'm the one who is putting the stories out there and deciding for myself, this is what's important. That's what I want to see. That's the story I want out there. And so I'm going to find a way to make that happen. So I think that's probably why I like being a producer a little bit more. But yeah.
Were you kind of like me, where I got to a point where I was kind of tired of being told what to do? And I was like, well, I just, if I was the leader, then I wouldn't be told what to do. And then maybe I could help people. And, you know, and you know, a way of like kind of, I don't say healing trauma, but like going back and like maybe self-correcting a little bit for the next person. So was that kind of what you experienced a little bit in your time so far?
I think so too. I think I accidentally fell into producing. I don't think I called myself a producer until I actually got a producer's residency, and it ended a lot sooner than we had expected it to. But by then I was just like, well, like, I guess I'm officially a producer. Somebody gave me a residency to produce stuff. And it was funny too, because 2 years before that, my friend Stephanie, when I was talking to her about all of the ideas that I had and all the things that I wanted to do, she literally called me out and was like, it sounds like you want to be a producer, Cori. All of the things that you're talking about, this is stuff that producers do. And it just sounded so daunting to me at the time. I was like, I'm not a producer. I can't produce. What are you talking about? I don't know how to do that. That sounds like a lot of stuff to do. And then she saw me. She's an actor. She just moved back to LA, but she saw me when we were both auditioning for something in DC. And she kind of laughed at me and she was like, hey, remember that time when I told you that you're a producer and you were like, no, I'm not. Look at you now, doing all the producer things. And I think it sunk in during that audition, because it was for a production of White Pearl here in DC.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't really like to do theater, but I was like, oh, it's a play with Asians in it. And there's at least one character that I can see myself playing. I would be really stupid if I didn't audition for this. And one of the actors, when she realized that I was auditioning, she was like, oh my God, I thought you were like one of the producers for the play, just sitting here in the lobby taking a break. And I was like, what? And she goes, now that I hear that you are a producer, that's probably why I thought it. She was like, I didn't want to say anything to you because I literally thought you were a producer on her coffee break. I was just like, oh, I guess it was weird.
You just give really that air.
I don't know. I think that was when it sunk into me. I was like, okay, so I'm given those vibes. I don't know how, but I guess I'm a producer now, because like people are reading that vibe off of me. But I think also too, I think I got tired of people telling me what to do, like you were saying. But it's interesting, right? Because you always think you can do it better. And then you get put into the position. Like when I produced my first theater production almost 2 years ago, I'm like, last year. No, that wasn't last year.
I know, 2 years, because the year that's missing, which is last year.
It was our blip, right? Like in the event, I've been watching Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and they keep talking about the blip, because I was watching WandaVision. I was like, the 2020 was our blip. That was our blip.
Yeah, totally.
that's our blip. But no, when I remember producing that, and of course, in you know, the tradition of theater, everything that can go wrong went wrong.
Of course.
And I had never produced anything in my life. And I just got I internalized everything. Like, I just remember being like, oh my God, all of these things went wrong. I'm such a failure. I can't believe it panned out. And it wasn't even a failure. Like, it was actually a very successful play. And I remember having to unpack that in therapy. And my therapist was just like, why do you keep saying you failed? Did it actually fail? And I was like, man. No, it was actually really successful. She was like, so where is this feeling of failure coming from? And it's weird, right? When you're a producer and you have this idea, this expectation of how you want things to go, and it just doesn't pan out the way that you want it to. It's not like when you're an actor and things don't go the way that you want it to, right? Like you can improv your way out of that. But when you're a producer and it has to do with money and time and resources, it's a little bit more daunting. So yeah, I think there was this sense of, I want to do it better, but also the realization that, well, you're going to have the same challenges that everybody else has along the way. And it's just a matter of how do you troubleshoot? How do you learn from those mistakes? I think, the first theater production I ever did, that was a huge learning curve, and it was a huge learning experience for me. And so I think, and I don't know if you have this, it's just like, okay, all of these things went wrong. How can we make it better next time? How can I avoid all of these things in the future? What can I do 10 steps ahead so that I don't have to deal with this when it actually happens? So I don't even have to, like, I can just avoid it. So
yeah, I feel like I've come to love the post-mortem meeting. Like I used to be afraid of those as a younger producer, because I was like, oh my God, everybody's going to tell me what I did wrong and like blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But it really is just a chance to, for lack of a better phrase, pick that scab, because as Asians, we're told you either succeed or you fail. There's no middle. And so like, and I totally connect with you when you said your therapist is like, why are you saying fail all the time? Because I literally had the same conversation with my therapist, and he was like, why do you always say things are failing? And then we got to the bottom of that, and let me know if you agree with me, but it was like Asian culture, because in our culture, and we can talk about being Filipino, like the stakes are very high, especially when you're like first gen like us. It's like, or for you, like the immigrant, and like for me, child of immigrants, it's like the stakes are really high, and like you have to succeed, and if you fail, it's like a setback. And it kind of bleeds into all parts of your life, where you're like, oh, like my relationships, if that person doesn't like me after the first date, it's a failure. Like if I don't get an A on this test, I'm a failure. Like I won't go to college, like all that stuff. So and I feel like we internalize that, and it happens in producing. And so the post-mortem is your chance to kind of wallow in that for a while, but in a productive way, where you're like, okay, these are the things that in my mind I feel are failures, but as a team, we can figure out what comes next and how we can be better for the next time. So
I will say that that first big year I had of producing, and the first play that I produced, I tried to have a post-mortem, and then I realized that I just was in a really bad place, like emotionally, mentally. And I think a lot of it too was just one of the things that I realized was I was burnt out, because we were producing an original play. It was called Torn Kid, and we were producing that from beginning to finish. I had been working on that for a year at that point. And of course, like, it's my first time producing, and it's a brand new organization. I didn't get paid for that. Like, that was 100% volunteer. And this is why I say that this was a huge learning curve for me. I was paying other artists before I was paying myself. Like, I walked away from that, like, financially in the hole, which is usually what producers end up doing, right? Like, that's the whole role of a producer. But also a smart producer figures out business-wise and financially, how can we finance this production without putting myself into personal debt and putting myself into like personal financial ruin, right? Like, that's what a smart producer does. But because it was my first time producing a play, I didn't understand all of that. And you also come from the arts world, where we're literally conditioned to think that our work is of no value. Like, we are lucky that we're even producing this. Like, you should be, you should be just building your resume and earning credits, not money. And you come from that kind of an environment where you are literally told that your work is worth nothing, and you should be grateful that you even have something to put on your resume. And so when you walk in with that kind of a mentality as a producer, there's a lot of really negative things that happen as a result of that. And so for me, part of my really negative headspace was that I walked away from it, and I had called it. I told everyone this. I called myself out on it. I was like, I cannot volunteer doing this, running this organization, producing events. I cannot do this as a volunteer for the rest of my life, because I'm going to tell you right now, if I don't get paid for the work that I'm putting into this, I'm going to be very bitter. If I'm doing this and everyone around me is getting paid, but I'm not, I'm gonna get really resentful really fast. And I did. I got very resentful very fast, because the actors were getting paid more than me, right? Like, and I made so many mistakes as to how I paid people. Like, this was crazy. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but in my attempt to be fair and equitable, like, we were trying to give people compensation for traveling. And that created a really uneven pay structure. Like, we had one actor that actually got paid more than even the director, because we were trying to compensate for travel expenses.
Oh yeah, that's happened
And
to me.
yeah, when I looked back on that in retrospect, I was like, that should have never happened. We should have never been in a position where A, as producers, we didn't get paid, and B, where there was an actor who got paid even more than the stage manager.
Hmm.
And, again, like learning curve, and I think that's
Yeah.
maybe where I felt those feelings of failure, because it was all of these things that I just you try to do the best that you can, and you try to
Yeah,
provide
of
things for
course.
everyone, and you try very, very hard to compensate everyone for their time and for their effort. And then you realize no matter how equitable you try to be, you're going to end up failing someone.
Yeah.
I don't think it helped that, as the producer, everyone's bitching to you or at you,
Yes. Oh my
and I'm
gosh.
sitting
Yeah.
there I know you are not complaining to me about how much you are not getting paid when I'm not getting paid at all. So that's
Right.
where my resentment came from. And so when I tried to do a postmortem, I was like, girl, you are not in the right headspace for a postmortem. You just need to sit in the
Yeah.
therapy and do some meditation and journal the shit out of your
Yeah.
experience, and then look back on this a year later and try to figure out, where you went wrong and what you can do better.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely. I feel like I've now learned that in terms of postmortem and trying to reflect, it doesn't have to be the day after the project ends. I know a lot of people expect that, but I'm just
yeah,
no, especially when you're the lead producer or whoever, you can make that decision. You can be like, guys, it ended yesterday, but let's talk in a month. Let's take
yeah,
some time so we can process our feelings and whatever, and then come
yeah,
back and have a real constructive, objective conversation about what
right.
happened. Because good or bad, after a project, your emotions are super high, and you're if it went well, you're this was the best ever, I want to tell everyone that they did such a good job, and I want to work with them forever and ever. And then if it went bad, you're fuck everyone, I hate all of you, I don't ever want to see you again, don't talk to me. And so
Oh my God.
uh, but
You're
that's the
everyone's public
realness.
enemy number one.
Right.
I can't deal with you right now. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, and I think it's what I realized, and I feel like you might have too. It's you realize that being the producer is being the sorority mother. You're the one who has to take care of everyone, make sure everyone's happy, hear all the complaints, feel all the complaints, and then try and resolve, but resolve in many different departments, right? So it's it could
right.
be about payment, it could be about interpersonal stuff. You are, because in theater HR doesn't exist, you are also HR.
Yeah,
So it's all of
yeah,
that, and it can be a lot. And so what I said to someone once, I was being a producer is being a professional at getting yelled at, whether it's good or bad. Everyone's
yeah,
always yelling at you about something, and you're
yeah.
okay, you just have to try and take it
Wusa.
with pride. Yeah, woo-side it out, and take it with some grain of salt, because it just, everyone's
Right.
very hyper personal in our
Yeah.
field.
I think also too, especially that first experience,
Hmm.
one of the things that really kind of did not sit well with me at the time, and why I internalized so much of it, was if one person does not do their job, everything goes to shit. And
Mm-hmm.
that was one of those situations where we had a couple of people high up that were not following through with their responsibilities or the things that they had said that they would do. And so of course it fell onto me and another person, but there wasn't a lot of communication that was happening. And it was weird too,
Sure.
because it was a collaboration between our organization and somebody else. And so what we realized in retrospect, and we did end up having a postmortem, me and this person, we had it almost a year later, because we were just not ready.
Yeah,
We could
yeah.
do it. But she and I had a postmortem, and what happened was we realized that we didn't want to come to each other with our problems, because she was representing that entity and I was representing this entity, and
Mm,
we were worried about complaining to each other and
sure.
revealing information that we couldn't. And then when it was almost a year later, we were like, fuck it, we're just gonna let it hang. What were
Yeah.
you going through, girl? And so for me too, it was really hard to not take everything personally, because
Yeah.
if things go wrong, then I felt like everyone was looking at me. Why did this go
Hmm.
right? Why did this go wrong? I said that, and I'm just you do it. Why
Right.
didn't you do it?
Yeah,
Why are you
you
looking
do
at
it
me?
then.
So I think that's why I got into this really bad headspace, because I was already burnt out, because we had also just started this, or I don't know why I thought starting an organization and producing an original play
Same time.
would be good.
Right.
Yeah, would be a good idea. Like in retrospect, it was great. But like if I were to do it
Yeah.
over again, I'd be like, give yourself a year, girl. Like give yourself a year.
Right. I feel like we all
But
go
yeah,
through like without realizing it, like a Shonda Rhimes year of yes without realizing we were doing that. And like in the worst way where we're like, let's just say
right.
yes to every project. And then you're like, oh my God, like I can't handle
Why
all
am
of
I
this at
doing this?
once. Right.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too was, we were going on momentum, like everyone
Mm-hmm.
was talking
Oh
about us,
yeah.
everyone was talking about us. We have to go by momentum, because if we don't
Mm-hmm.
take advantage of this momentum now, which now, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing why I'm feeling burnt out right now, because I'm like, there's momentum, there's momentum, there's
Yeah.
momentum. We have to take it. But like, you realize that momentum isn't sustainable all the time.
Yeah.
Like if you want to ride momentum, you have to structure it in a way that will be sustainable in the future. So I hope that I've learned from that experience, or that inexperience now, because there
Of course.
is this unfortunate momentum that's happening in our community now. And, we are trying very hard to be like, okay, while all eyes are on us, how can we use this moment to expand what it is that we were already doing? Because, our whole mission as APAC, as Asian Pacific Arts Collective, is to amplify AAPI voices. And right
Mm-hmm.
now, with everything that's happening in the nation, this is a time where AAPI voices and stories is so important. So yes, there is this momentum, and I'm trying really hard to be cognizant of burnout mode, because I've
Yeah.
already went through that. And now that I understand what it is and how to recognize it in myself, I'm trying very hard to be like, okay, girl, like, yes, there's momentum, take your time, set the building blocks, get things into play. Let's be a little bit more organized about this, and acknowledge certain things that are probably going to happen, and what you can anticipate might go wrong. And so I hope I've learned from that experience. You never know, right? Because every
Yeah.
producing
Yeah.
experience is a little different.
Right. It's always different, and you meet different people, and each project I feel will present its own challenges.
Hi, my name's Jeremy Powell, co-host of the Oranges, Oranger, Browns podcast. Check us out anywhere you listen to podcasts. For all your Browns coverage, post-game, pre-game, anything you need Browns, you'll find it here on the Oranges, Oranger, Browns podcast.
Hey everyone, I'm Cori Dioquino, and you are watching Producing While Asian.
As a person of color, because our experiences starting organizations and being the producer is very different, right? Because there's this like
Right.
slight air of higher expectation that
Right.
you hear all the time about, like, if I mess it up, I mess it up for everybody.
Everyone, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about kind of how you went into creating your organization, going with that mission that you had, and then how that kind of led you to your social activism now, like how you got involved with Unapologetically Asian and Racism is a Virus, and how all of that kind of gels together within your moniker of being a producer, because I feel like it's all relative, right?
Right. So for me, as far as Asian Pacific Arts Collective is concerned, I actually forgot about this, but like a friend of mine reminded me after we founded ourselves that I had been wanting to do something like that for years, because he and I had actually tried to start a theater company that centered on immigrant voices, because both of us were, I was an immigrant child and he was a child of immigrants. And so we wanted to start a theater company that focused on immigrant voices. But then we realized that starting a theater company is really hard.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It is. And then with APAC, what ended up happening was I had a blog at the time called I'm Not a Ninja. And it was basically my way of trying to figure out what my own voice was in the industry as a Filipino. And it was me. I was reading a lot of personal essays by a lot of other Asian Americans. And I was really trying to figure out, like, what does representation mean to me as an actor? And why is it important? And it went from being a blog about representation in the arts to just me telling my story and interviewing people and talking about, like, ooh, this is really important.
Yeah.
And people should pay attention to it. And then I ended up writing this really pissed off blog about a production of The Mikado that I called Mika Don't.
Mika Don't. Wait, when was this?
This was in 2018, and it had a picture of me dressed up as like a terrible, like geisha character
Was this the
person.
summer that you and I like officially connected? I feel
I
like it was
think
about
so.
that. Yeah, because people
Yeah.
were coming to me about it too. And I was like, oh man, like I have to hide my face because I was in a production of Hot Mikado in high school. Like, you know? So anyway, sorry to interrupt. Continue.
No, you're fine. No, it's funny because so the backstory to that was I wrote it in response to this Baltimore Sun article. And then, am I allowed to say that? I wrote it in response to an article
It's fine.
that was
It's
in a
fine.
newspaper.
They get enough criticism anyway, so it's all right.
True. But I wrote it in response, and it wasn't so much the article itself, it was what the person they were interviewing said that kind of pissed me off.
Mhm.
But I wasn't ready to publish it. Like I made it live
Sure.
on my blog and I posted it in the private Facebook group that I had started that's now got like 200 something people in it for like Asian American artists. And at the time I had started that just for theater people. And I posted it in the Facebook group and said, hey, I wrote this blog. Please don't share it yet. I'm not ready for it to be shared. I wanted your feedback.
Yeah.
Tell me if it's too angry. I remember saying that. I was like, is it too sarcastic and angry?
Yeah.
And I guess somebody read it, didn't read my comments about please don't share it yet. I'm still editing it.
Oh,
and they
Lord.
posted it on their Facebook. And they were like, this is how I feel about the Mikado. And I was like, no.
Oh, no.
I literally was like freaking out. I was like texting her frantically. I was like, I wasn't ready. And then it just went viral. Like all of a sudden people shared it. It became my most shared, like viewed post ever. It started all of this ruckus. And I was just like, oh, okay, so clearly y'all needed someone to be angry. I'll be that angry poster child for you. That's fine. But then, but we had already planned, I had already organized a meeting in Baltimore for Asian American theater artists.
Mm-hmm.
And then people in DC were like, can we participate in that? And then someone in DC, Kyoshin, helped me organize a DC meeting. And so that's what happened. So like the DC folks ended up creating, I think like the DC APA coalition. I can't remember their full acronym. So they ended up doing that. And then I proposed in Baltimore that we start a theater company. And then someone else said, why don't we make it an arts collective? Because not everyone is a theater person. And if we make it about artists, then there's more people that we can represent and reach out to. So that's how we started Asian Pacific Arts Collective. Nice. And then after that, we were just like riding momentum. And I think I was thinking about this the other day, as far as like activism goes, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but like as you're, you know, a Filipino or as just like a person of color in general, the stakes are always high for you. Mm-hmm. And when you realize that you put yourself in this position where people are inevitably looking at you, like people are looking up to you, whether you want them to or not, I sort of had this conclusion of like, well, I better figure out what hill I'm dying on because like people are looking at me, like I better stand for something. So let me figure out what I stand for and like stick to my guns because no matter what I do, like I'm Ate Cori, like I come from a community where I was like the first Filipino immigrant child in my personal community. And on my mom's side of the family, I'm the eldest cousin. So I've always been Ate Cori. So I think I had this like mentality of like, well, everyone's looking at me. I better figure out like what I'm standing for and what hell I'm going to die on. Otherwise, this was all for nothing. So I think that's probably how activism kind of just bled into my work because even just being Asian, just telling your story is a form, just being yourself is a form of activism, which is unfortunate in some ways, but necessary.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes, and in my experience, like because through the work I do, I just do my work and then I forget to look around and see like, oh, I am the only brown person in this room, or like I am the only Asian voice at this table about an Asian show, you know, and it's, which happens so often and it's surprising.
So sad.
Yeah, it's sad. And, you know, you don't want to be the tokenized only, but sometimes you end up in that square because you just know the people that are going to ask you to do this. And so I think the challenge too, where we're at and where we're sitting is like, how do we then spread that to others, like to other people like us, in our community who want to do the same thing or who have an opportunity to voice what they're thinking, you know. And I think that story about your blog is so amazing, and like it's needed, because we're like we've all been saying, culturally we don't yell and scream about what's wrong, and now it's our time to do it. And if it takes a Cori or a Don Mike to stand up and write a really forward facing terse blog post,
Yeah.
then so be it, you know. And
Yeah.
I feel like it all just contributes to that same kind of wanting change direction that we're going in. In that same time, DC Metro Theater Arts approached me, and they said that they were talking to you. And that's when, at the time,
I think that's when you and I met.
Yeah, it's when we met, because the editor-in-chief at the time, Nicole, was like, do you know Cori? And I was like, I don't know Cori. And she was like, you two should talk. And she's like, and in the meantime, do you want to write something about this issue? And I was like, sure. And my blog then used to be called Producing the District. And so it was like about things happening in the DMV. And so I wrote for DCMTA, but then I wrote something on my own blog that I've transferred to Producing While Asian. And it's called, I can't remember the exact title, but it'll be linked in the stuff. I think I said diversity and inclusion doesn't mean no white people, because the question that was coming my way was, yeah, we want to diversify theater and, you know, in our productions and stuff, but, you know, a lot of people are feeling like, oh, well, I'm white, I can't be part of that. Because I had a bunch of white theater friends who were like, well, they're just not looking for me right now. And I'm like, that's really not okay to say, but also that's not true. Like we're talking about equity. And so, you know, our job in our respective organizations is to bring that equity. And so, you know, tell me how that led to now being one of the founders of Unapologetically Asian, and kind of where, you know, using your platform now to help make that change, and, so to speak, finding that hill to die on you're talking about. And so, and it's hard too, because people expect you as the ate or the kuya to just have that cause, and then once the pressure of, like, once you've locked into something, of not being able to change what you're talking about, there's also that pressure.
Oh,
so
I
talk to
change
us
all
about
the
that.
time.
Right.
I change. I'm always just like, listen, like, convince me that I'm wrong about something and I'll own up to it. Like, because I feel like, you know, that's part of, I think, being a leader, is being able to pivot and say, you know what, I fucked up. Like, let me own it. Like, I fucked up. And this is, I'm going to go on a rant about cancel culture. I hate cancel culture. I hate cancel culture, because I read an article recently that was about how cancel culture is very much driven by capitalism, because it's all about taking away your financial support from an entity. And I feel like cancel culture only works, though, for large entities like Amazon or Google or whatever. But like for smaller organizations, it doesn't always work, right? Because I feel like, especially when you come from like a DIY community like Baltimore, or just like a small theater community like DC, cancel culture can really work against people, right? Because it doesn't give you the space to mess up. And I think sometimes people, exactly. And I think also too that there's this reaction to when people mess up. It's like, now we can't support them at all. And it's like, no, what we want to see when people get called out is not that we cancel you. What I want to see when people get called out is, okay, I acknowledge it, I messed up, and these are the things that I'm going to do moving forward to show you that I have changed and that I've realized that, you know, because I would love to see a leader who is like, yo, I messed up, but I'm not going to step down unless they really, really have to.
Unless you like did something horrible. Yeah.
Unless it's like really, really egregious. Right. But if it's just a matter of like, oh, there was a situation, I really messed up, I don't necessarily think that person has to step down, but I do think that they need to step up. I think that's what it is, right? You have to realize, like, when someone's getting called out, you don't necessarily have to step down, you just have to step up. And how are you going to show us that you're stepping up, you know? So I think sometimes cancel culture can really work against people. That's my rant on cancel culture.
No, I mean, it needs to be said, because a lot of people assume that the right answer is cancel culture, and that because everybody's doing it, that's what they should do. And it's in my mind, it's a case by case basis. Like, you can't just keep canceling everything, because then eventually you'll end up with nothing. So then what do you do? And so, yeah.
And that's not a conversation either. If you just, you know, a person walking away from the conversation, well, now the conversation is over. You know, you have to be able to sustain that conversation, continue that conversation. I forgot what the original question was before I got on my rants about cancel culture. There was a reason why I got
No,
on a
you're
rant
good.
about cancel culture. Why was I talking about that? Why was I talking about? What was your original question?
Well, I was kind of leading you to talking about your activism work now. So
Okay.
with cancel, yeah.
I thank you. I don't know why I like one thought led to another, and I was like, oh, by the way, cancel culture sucks.
Oh yeah, no, that happens to me.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get like hype, like something, and it might be that something triggers that thought in you, and you're like, this is something that I have a lot of thoughts about. And so yeah, no worries.
Yeah. But I think it's so funny, right? Like, I think I've gotten to this point where when I was younger, I used to think, oh, I'm so angry. That's my go-to emotion. Because it's my go-to emotion. And
Sure.
I own that. And I remember telling a friend of mine years and years ago after a really bad breakup, I was like, see, I wish I was like you. Like, my go-to emotion after a breakup or when I'm upset is to be angry. Like, I just immediately am angry. And my friend said something that I wasn't expecting. She said, see, I wish I was more like you. I wish I was more angry. She goes, I feel like I'm not angry enough about the things that happen in my life. And she was really big into psychology. So she was reading all of these articles, and she said a lot of psychologists consider anger to be the most productive emotion in the human psyche, because it's the one that forces you to act, to make some kind of a change in your situation.
True.
You get angry about something, you do something about it. And also it can be the most destructive emotion in the human psyche. But I think I've sort of looked back on that in retrospect, and I've realized how my anger has actually saved me a lot of times, not just in real life situations where I feel like I have to protect myself, but also just even in my career. The fact that an accidental viral blog about just me being angry was what resonated with people. I'm starting to realize that what my friend said years ago about, like, I wish I was more angry, I'm not angry enough. I'm starting to realize that maybe that's just like a cultural thing. Because even in American culture, like, 7 deadly sins, wrath is a 7 deadly sin. I'm like, wrath not to be mistaken with anger, guys. Anger is a basic human emotion. Wrath is destructive, not anger.
Right.
So I'm starting to realize that, maybe setting the example of how to be angry is probably a good thing. Because I don't think, especially when you're a woman of color, being angry can be a really dangerous thing, right? Like, it's not always safe to be angry. So I think for me, that's how I got involved with, like, the team from Racism is a Virus and Unapologetically Asian, was because Diane, you should meet Diane at some point. Diane Phelan, I posted my Racism is a Virus post where I was just like, I'm being provocative. Do I have your attention? I'm flipping off the camera. And I made the whole post about being angry. And Diane reached out to me and was like, thank you for writing that. I really appreciated it. And then Justine Morale introduced me to Diane because she knew Diane. Then Diane and I are now, like, in quarantine. Now we're like best friends. And we're always talking about being like, shit, awesome. I'm literally like, how is this happening? Like, I've never met you in person, and somehow you've become like my best friend in the last year. But yeah, so that's how I got involved with them. With, like, literally we bonded over just being angry and being frustrated that we felt that more people weren't angry enough. And I won't say I don't consider myself a founder of Unapologetically Asian, but I was on the founding team. Like, I was, I helped a lot. Like, I was on the launching team, I think is probably a better way to put it. Because Diane is like the mastermind. Diane and Jeremiah, I think, are like the masterminds behind that.
So with Diane, I'm like you, I like know her, but I don't know her, right? So it's like, I got connected to her through both Justine and another actor, Laura Nicolas, who I don't know if you know her or not, but so Justine and Laura both mutually know Diane. And so then when all of the Racism is a Virus stuff was happening, and eventually Unapologetically Asian, it was kind of similar, where I posted a photo with it wasn't Racism is a Virus, it was when Unapologetically Asian came out, and I posted my picture with the yellow t-shirt and was talking about, like, yellow versus gold. And Diane reached out to me, and she was like, oh my God, I just, like, felt that post, like, felt the, reclaiming the color yellow. And I was like, yeah. So she was part of an event that we did last fall, I think, with the election, and we pulled her in
Oh yeah.
to something to talk about both organizations. And so, yeah, I hope to meet her in person one day too. And she's just an
We're all
incredible
going to take a trip.
person.
You, me, and Justine and
Right.
Katrina, we're all going to take a trip up to New York, and we're just all going to like
just one
bond.
big hang.
I know, on someone's like rooftop deck.
Right.
Or rooftop. We're just gonna have a barbecue. We're just all gonna hang out, like just all the Asians.
Yeah, if he hasn't moved yet, I know who does have an awesome rooftop in New York, Vishal Vaidya. He's in Harlem, and so that his rooftop is pretty epic. It's so maybe I'll ask him. I'd be like, so do you want all the Asians to come over?
We'll just have
one
a
day?
bunch. We'll do like several rooftop barbecues, like all in a row, like all one weekend.
I'm so excited for that time. Right.
Oh my God.
We're almost there. We're almost there.
I know.
Like
I'm getting my first vaccine tomorrow. I'm so excited.
Oh, congrats. Which one? Do you know ahead of time?
I don't know yet. I know it's either Moderno or I say Moderno. Moderno. I like go all Spanish on it. Moderno or Pfizer. If you're Filipino, there's no F, so it's just Pfizer.
There's no F. Pfizer.
Pfizer. It's either Moderno or Pfizer. One of
That's awesome. Well, good luck. It's I just finished my second dose the other weekend, and that second dose doesn't play. The first dose was fine, and the second dose I was like, is this what COVID is like? And then I was like, it's only for a day and then it's gone. But I'm like, okay. I think I described it as like COVID has a chance to like punch you in the face once, but then it doesn't get to anymore because the vaccine is like, nope, you're done. Anyway.
I'm like anticipating it because I'm getting my first dose tomorrow, and then you have to wait to get
3 weeks. Yeah.
3 weeks, or if it's the other one, it's 4 weeks. And I'm actually, of course, I'm producing something else, but our shoot date is May 1st. And so I'm debating about pushing it back maybe a week or two, because I'm like, well, now that I'm getting my vaccine, that's about the time that I'm due to get my second shot. So I'm like, maybe I should push it back a week just to be safe. Like, because we also have like rehearsals. Like I want to rehearse in the space the weekend before. So we'll see.
Yeah, choices. See, producer choices. It's like,
I know, right?
Do I want to survive a pandemic or work on my art? Choice.
Maybe I'll get the second dose and I'll just like plug through it while I'll use it as motivation as I'm like performing this thing that I'm producing. I'll just be like, I'm dying. It's fine.
So can you?
Hi, my name is Sam Post, owner of Phenomenal CBD store and PhenomenalCBD.com. That's like phenomenal, CBD.com. Tune in where we talk with experts about how the amazing hemp plant can make a difference for people's health and well-being from the Press Play Podcast Network.
You've been pining, you've been waiting for Reggae and Rhoda to get back together. We got you. Press Play Podcast. We're ready to go. We're going to have our podcast with everything that you want. Browns, Cavaliers, Indians, Ohio State, the national scene. Kenny Rhoda, Michael Reggae back together again. Make sure you keep your ears open. It's happening right here on Press Play Podcast. See you then.
Hey everyone, I'm Cori Dioquino and you are watching Producing While Asian.
Can you talk about that project yet, or is it still under wraps?
Yeah, by the time this comes out, it'll probably be close to when I'm dropping it. So yes, I'll talk about it. The day after the shooting, the Atlanta shooting, I, like a lot of people in the community, was just kind of like, what the fuck? And I was in a daze for days, actually. I was going to say just for like the day afterwards, I was kind of like in this weird headspace, but no, I'm still in a weird headspace. I think I'm just trying to get through it. But I ended up writing, I just had this need to do something. And the way that I described it to my friend who's the choreographer for it, he's choreographing it. I told him, I was like, I think this was my way of controlling what I could, because I felt like there were so many things that I couldn't control.
Yeah.
And so for me, this is my response, because it's like the only thing I can control are my actions and my reactions. And this is both an action and a reaction. Like, I don't know what else to do, so I'm going to do this. So I ended up writing something that I intended to perform. And I really just wanted to make an art piece out of it. This is all of the things that I'm feeling. This is my anger. This is my hate. This is my frustration. This is my grief, all into one thing. And I wrote it with the intention that it would be performed with movement and filmed as kind of like a artistic piece. So we'll see what happens. You know, we're still in pre-production. Hopefully it will be dropped sometime in May. It really depends on if we have to reschedule the shoot because of my COVID vaccine. But yeah, so we'll see. My goal is to have it out before the end of May, and I think for me it's too, you know, APAC is doing an arts contest as well that we're about to really announce. We're gonna open submissions for it in May as well. And we've actually decided that we're gonna make this arts contest for the whole East Coast.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah, because we were really thinking about it, and basically, you know, Catrice and I, who's the other co-executive director, and our advisory committee, basically we're just kind of like, we need to go big or go home. Like, all eyes are on us. People are looking at us. People want to hear AAPI stories right now. And now is the time more than ever that we need to be sharing them. And so that's why we want to extend it to the East Coast. So we're in the process of, you know, fundraising and getting sponsors, and we're going to open submissions to online. Our goal is to open up submissions May 31st. But as we're planning all of this, you know, it's like we're trying to empower and encourage other Asian artists to tell their story through art as a form of, you know, kind of defiance. Like, I am telling my story in spite of everything that is happening, because this is what needs to be done. And I kind of had this epiphany of, it's like, I can't empower other people to use art to tell their story if I'm not telling my own. Because what use is that? So I was like, I'm going to create this piece for myself, not for anybody else. I'm going to create this for myself. I'm going to use art. I'm going to tell my story, and I'm going to do this. And, you know, maybe it'll empower someone, maybe it won't, but really it was just, it was one of those projects where it's like, if I don't do this, I'm going to regret it. And so I have a videographer, a choreographer, we're working, we have a space, we have a shoot date. So hopefully we don't have to push it back, but yeah, so hopefully everyone will see that sometime in May.
Sweet. So that leads me to my next kind of second to last question. So, well, actually we can do that question last. This question is more specific. So tell us, given everything you've experienced so far and the opportunities you've had as a producer and kind of the people you've been able to work with, if you had, I'm not going to say one because that's always so much pressure, so I'm going to let it be more of an open-ended, but if you had a fruit basket of advice to give to AAPI people who are looking to either dabble in producing or support a producer or just learn more, you know, like what, or to even get into this career field, you know, what would your kind of pieces of advice be?
I think the same advice that I got so many times throughout my career is just do it, you know? And I think we always think that there are roadblocks, you know, we always think that I guess the way that I like to see it is that a task always seems daunting until it's done, right? Like, you have no idea how you're going to get it done until you actually do it. Like, you can sit there and plan your whole entire life and, you know, never get anything accomplished. But, you know, I think part of being a producer is learning, you know, how to have this balance of how do we ride momentum and also plan at the same time. And it's kind of these two simultaneous things that you always have to sort of have in the back of your mind, is that you're always trying to create a sustainable option, but also you're trying to take advantage of a moment that you have, right? Like, this is when I have this idea, I'm going to do it now. And also I think, you know, the very, very first film I ever produced is still not done because it's not, we filmed it in 2018 and it never got finished because I learned the hard way that all of the money and the effort goes into post-production, goes into the editing. And,
Yeah.
you know, for the longest time, I was like, we're going to get it done. We're going to get it done. And now I'm just like, I don't even know if it's ever going to get done at this point. Like,
Sure.
I don't understand
Is it
that.
all,
And
it's all shot now and done? It just needs to
it's
be
all
edited?
shot. There's a rough edit. And I'm still like, at some point we're going to finish this and drop it on Vimeo, and it's just going to be its own thing. And I'm not even going to, like, you know, I'm not going to think about it. Like, at some point I'm going to finish it, you know, I don't know, maybe in 10 years when the child who was in it is like 20, but
it's like that one movie where they like followed someone for 20 years, except
there's a kid in it and now he's like 14, and when we shot it he was like 11, and now he's like a teenager, and I'm like, by the time we do this, like, Nico's going to be in college and he's going to be like, oh, okay, cool, like, look at this thing I did when I was 11.
Everyone's going to be like, I want to book that kid. Where is he? Oh, he's in college now.
he's a grown-ass man. He's like, his voice is dropped and he's got an Adam's apple. Like, I don't think you're going to get the same result. But no, I think if I were to give, God, I hate giving advice. I think if anything, just like from my own personal experience, it's just like, don't be afraid to fuck up. You're going to fuck up no matter what you do, man. Like,
absolutely,
you know, nothing is ever going to turn out the way you want it to. But I think, you know, if you give it the chance, if you even just try it, you might end up getting something else that is like beautiful in its own way. You know, like, things are beautiful not because they're perfect, but because they're imperfect. So I think that's the thing, right? Like,
totally,
you know, and don't be afraid of those unfinished projects. I have a lot of those. It's fine. You're not a failure if you don't finish a project. That's what I learned the hard way.
Yeah, I think it's just you pick it up later and you have something else to do, right? So you never know. And so given that, where can people find you? They can find you or your organization, and, you know, where can they see your work, or, you know, even like how to book you, things like that?
Yeah, well, right now they can look at my website. It's CoriDioquino.com. For Asian Pacifica Arts Collective, we have a website as well. It's BaltimoreAPAC.org. So people can see that. As far as the video piece, the art piece that I'm going to drop in May, don't have a drop date yet, but more than likely I'll be dropping that on YouTube and also probably on Facebook and my website. So yeah, so I'll probably be posting stuff about that on my Instagram too, just kind of like sneak previews and stuff like that. So we'll see.
Well, thank you again so much for coming on and sharing all of your experiences, and hopefully, you know, I definitely look forward to having you on again if there's anything else that comes up in the future, or just want to come and hang. You know, season 1 is all about kind of small one-on-one or small group conversations, and then hopefully down the road we'll have crossover episodes where we talk with different people from different places. So I'm so glad you could be part of season 1. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Producing While Asian podcast. Our theme song was created by Luckstock. We are produced by Press Play Podcast, and the show is edited by Michael Santos Sandoval. If you have a moment, please leave a review and a rating, and be sure to send us any topic ideas you have to producingwhileasian@gmail.com. To follow us, stay updated, and read our blog, visit www.producingwhileasian.com. We hope you join us again soon.